$1 million at chess, not knowing the toddler hadn't lost a game in his life. Hey, stop scrolling for a second, because what I'm about to tell you involves a 28-year-old woman who laughed at a 3-year-old little girl. Toddler. She mocked her right in front of everyone. Called her just the maid's kid. Treated her like she was invisible. Like she didn't belong in the same room as people like her. And then, her billionaire fiancé placed a $1 million bet on a chess game. Against that same little girl. He thought it was funny. She thought it was hilarious. Neither of them knew that this tiny 3-year-old had never lost a single game in her entire life. One game. I still can't believe this actually happened. Welcome back, beautiful people. Make you feel something real deep inside your heart. Before we dive in, I want to ask you something warm and simple. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city. You really love reading every single one of those. Today's story is one of the most emotional, jaw-dropping, and heartwarming things I have ever had the privilege of sharing. It's about pride. It's about dignity. It's about a little girl who had nothing, and walked into a room full of everything, and left everyone speechless. Stay with me. Every single second of this story is worth it. Promise you that. Some people wear their cruelty like jewelry. Polished, proud, and on full display for the whole world to see. His name was Daniel Hargrove, 32 years old, a self-made billionaire from Austin, Texas, who had built a real estate empire from the ground up before he was 26. Tall, sharp-eyed, confident in the way that only people with serious money tend to be confident. Not arrogant exactly, but certain. Certain that the world worked the way he understood it to work. Certain that talent could be spotted immediately. Certain that people's worth was visible if you just paid attention. He had a grand estate just outside the city. Rolling green lawns, a driveway that stretched longer than most people's entire blocks. A house with 14 rooms that gleamed like something out of a magazine. He was proud of it. He had every right to be proud of it. And he was deeply, completely head over heels in love with a woman named Vanessa Cole. Vanessa was 28. Beautiful in the kind of way that commanded a room the second she entered it. She had grown up in wealthy circles, attended private schools, knew all the right people, said all the right things in all the right settings. She had a laugh that could make you feel included or excluded, depending entirely on which side of it you were standing on. The two of them together looked like a magazine cover. Perfect on the surface. Absolutely perfect. But here's the thing about surfaces. They only show you what something looks like, not what it is. Daniel had employed a housekeeper named Rosa Mendez for nearly 3 years. Rosa was a quiet, hard-working woman in her early 40s who had come to the United States from a small town in New Mexico when she was barely 19. She cleaned Daniel's home 5 days a week, cooked when asked, kept everything running with a kind of silent dedication that made the entire house feel alive and ordered. She never complained. She never asked for more than she had agreed to. She simply worked, with dignity and with grace. Rosa had a daughter, a little girl named Lily. Lily was 3 years old. And on certain days when Rosa could not find or afford childcare, she would bring Lily to work with her. Daniel had no objection. He actually liked it. He had seen Lily toddling around the hallways a handful of times and had always found it quietly charming. There was something about that little girl that made the house feel more human, more warm. Lily was small, curly brown hair, giant dark eyes that seemed to take in everything around her with this deep, serious attention that you almost never see in a child that young. She didn't run around screaming like most toddlers. She observed. She studied. She sat quietly in corners and watched the world with an intensity that made adults stop and look twice. Rosa had noticed early on that Lily was different. At 18 months, Lily had been arranging objects on the kitchen floor in patterns that Rosa could not fully explain. By 2, she had been completing simple jigsaw puzzles meant for children 5 and 6 years old. By 2.5, she had discovered chess. It started because Rosa had found an old wooden chess set at a thrift store. She had bought it for $2, thinking it might be fun to set out on the table. She had no real idea how to play herself. She knew the basic rules, nothing more. But Lily had picked up one of the pieces, turned it over in her small fingers, and looked up at her mother with those serious dark eyes. And from that afternoon forward, Lily had become obsessed. Rosa had shown her the basic movements from a YouTube video. Within a week, Lily was correcting her mother. Within a month, Lily had beaten every adult Rosa knew who agreed to sit down across from her. Within 6 months, Lily had become something none of them had a word for yet. But Vanessa didn't know any of that. Vanessa didn't know anything about Lily except that she was the maid's child. And to Vanessa, that was all she needed to know. Now let me ask you something honestly. Have you ever met someone who judged a person completely before they even knew a single real thing about them? Drop is going to hit differently if you have. The moment a cruel word leaves your mouth, you have already started building the trap you will one day fall into yourself. It was a Saturday afternoon in late October. The kind of golden, cool Texas afternoon that makes everything feel cinematic and slow. Daniel had invited a small group of friends and business associates over to the estate for what he called a casual gathering. About 30 people total. Wine on the back patio, catered food from a restaurant downtown, soft jazz playing from speakers hidden in the garden walls. Vanessa was in full hostess mode. She moved through the crowd with precision, laughing at the right moments, touching arms gently, making everyone feel seen and important. She was genuinely gifted at this. Performing warmth. Rosa was working that afternoon, moving quietly through the house, keeping glasses filled, keeping the kitchen organized, staying invisible the way good household staff always seem to do at these kinds of events. She had brought Lily with her because her usual sitter had cancelled that morning with no warning. Lily sat in the corner of the large kitchen, on a small folded blanket Rosa had brought, with a wooden chess set arranged in front of her. She was playing against herself, moving pieces slowly and thoughtfully, completely absorbed. She had a cup of apple juice beside her and a small plate of crackers, and she looked, to anyone who glanced in, like the most content child in the world. Vanessa walked into the kitchen to check on something and stopped when she saw Lily. Her expression shifted, just slightly. The way a face shifts when something unexpected and slightly unwelcome appears in a space where you thought everything was controlled. "Rosa," she said, her voice carrying that particular sweetness that is not actually sweet at all. "Is this your daughter?" Rosa looked up from the counter and smiled carefully. "Yes, Miss Vanessa. I'm sorry my sitter cancelled today. She won't be any trouble, I promise." Vanessa looked at Lily for a long moment. Lily did not look up. She was studying the board. "What is she doing with that?" Vanessa asked, nodding toward the chess set. "She likes to play," Rosa said simply. Vanessa let out a short laugh. Not a mean laugh. Something worse. A dismissive one. The kind that says, "I don't even consider this worth real cruelty." "She's 3, Vanessa said. "She doesn't know what she's doing. She's just moving pieces around." Rosa said nothing. Vanessa walked back out to the gathering. But she mentioned it. Out on the patio, in that laughing social voice she used so well, she told a small group of Daniel's friends about the toddler in the kitchen playing pretend chess. She made it funny. She made it charming even. But underneath the charm was something dismissive. Something that said this child and her mother belong in a different category than the rest of us here. Few people laughed politely. A few smiled. Daniel heard it from across the patio. He glanced toward the kitchen window and then back at Vanessa. Something small and quiet moved through his chest. He wasn't sure what it was yet. It was one of his friends, a man named Marcus who had grown up playing competitive chess, who first walked into the kitchen out of curiosity. Marcus was 40 years old, sharp and funny, a man who took chess seriously. He had seen the board from the doorway and something had caught his eye. The arrangement of the pieces. He walked in slowly, Lily still did not look up. Marcus crouched down to her level and studied the board for a long moment. Then he looked up at Rosa with a completely different expression on his face than the one Vanessa had worn. Not dismissive. Something closer to disbelief. "How long has she been playing?" he asked quietly. "About 8 months," Rosa said. Marcus looked back at the board. He picked up a white bishop slowly and looked at Lily. "May I?" he asked her. Lily looked up at him for the first time. She studied his face for a moment with those dark, serious eyes. Then she nodded once. Marcus made his move. Lily looked at the board. 4 seconds passed. She moved a piece. Marcus stared. He made another move, more carefully this time. Lily moved again immediately. 7 minutes later, Marcus sat back on his heels and looked up at Rosa with an expression on his face that Rosa had never seen on an adult before when looking at her daughter. Pure awe. Do you think Vanessa had any idea what she had just dismissed so casually? Think about that for a moment. Because the story is about to shift in a way nobody at that gathering expected. The truth about extraordinary people is that they don't announce themselves. The room eventually goes quiet on its own. Marcus stood up from his crouch slowly. He walked back out to the patio where the gathering was still in full swing, and he found Daniel standing near the outdoor bar talking to 2 other men. Marcus pulled Daniel aside with a hand on his arm and spoke quietly into his ear. Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Marcus said, keeping his voice low, "that child in your kitchen just beat me. Cleanly. In under 10 minutes. I was not going easy on her, Daniel. I was playing seriously by move 3. Daniel looked at him for a long moment. Marcus was not a man who exaggerated. He was not a man who was easily impressed. Daniel knew this about him deeply. "She's 3 years old," Daniel said. "I know how old she is," Marcus said. "Go see for yourself." Daniel walked into the kitchen. Rosa looked up with that careful expression she always wore around him. Lily was resetting the pieces on the board, placing each one in its starting position with a focused precision that was genuinely striking in a child her size. Daniel crouched down the same way Marcus had. "Hi there," he said softly. Lily looked at him. Those serious dark eyes. "Can I play with you?" he asked. Lily considered him. Then she turned the board so that the white pieces faced him. Daniel smiled and made his opening move. Standard opening. Testing. What happened over the next 18 minutes quietly rearranged something inside Daniel Hargrove that had not moved in a very long time. She did not rush. She did not fidget. She did not get distracted by sounds from the patio or by her apple juice or by anything at all. She sat across from one of the sharpest strategic minds Daniel had built his business career on, and she played with a calm, precise, devastating patience that made his scalp prickle with something he could not immediately name. By move 12 he was genuinely in trouble. By move 17 he was completely cornered. When it was over he sat very still for a moment. Then he looked up at Rosa, who had been watching quietly from the counter, and he said in a voice that was much softer than his usual voice, "How long?" 8 months, Rosa said again. Daniel stood up slowly. He looked at Lily, who was already calmly resetting the pieces again. He looked back at Rosa. "Has she ever lost?" he asked. Rosa shook her head. "Not once," she said. "Not to anyone who's ever sat down with her." Daniel walked back outside. He found Vanessa laughing with a group near the garden. He stood near her for a moment, watching her, and that quiet thing in his chest from earlier had become something louder now. He waited until the group had shifted slightly before he leaned close to Vanessa and said quietly, "The little girl in the kitchen just beat me at chess." Vanessa turned to look at him. Then she laughed. That laugh again, light and dismissive. "Daniel, she's a toddler. You probably let her win." "That's adorable." "I did not let her win," he said. Something in his voice made Vanessa look at him more carefully. "You're serious," she said. I'm serious. A silence settled between them. And this is where Vanessa made the mistake that would change everything. Pride is a dangerous thing. Especially the kind of pride that has never once been truly challenged. Vanessa straightened. She set her wine glass down on the table beside her. And in the voice she used when she was performing confidence for an audience, she walked toward the kitchen doors and pushed them open and said loud enough for the nearest guests to hear, "I want to see this." Within 4 minutes, 8 people had drifted toward the kitchen doorway out of curiosity. Within 6 minutes, the entire gathering of 30 people had found reason to wander inside or press near the large kitchen windows. Vanessa sat down across from Lily. She knew how to play chess. She had learned in college. She was reasonably good. She had won casual games at dinner parties more than once. She looked at this 3-year-old little girl sitting across from her and felt nothing except mild amusement. Lily looked back at her with those dark eyes. No expression. No nervousness. No performance of any kind. And the game began. What would you do if you were in Daniel's position in that moment? Watching the woman you planned to marry sit down across from a 3-year-old child she had mocked just enough to want to know. Sometimes the universe arranges its lessons with a precision that no human being could ever plan. The kitchen had gone completely silent. 30 adults, wine glasses held loosely in their hands, catered appetizers forgotten on plates, stood watching a 3-year-old girl and a 28-year-old woman sit across a wooden chessboard in a kitchen in Austin, Texas, on a golden October afternoon. Vanessa made her opening move with the easy confidence of someone who believed the outcome was already decided. Lily looked at the board for exactly 3 seconds. Then she moved. Vanessa paused. She had not expected that response. She regrouped and moved again more carefully. Lily moved again. For seconds this time. By move 5, Marcus had quietly pressed through the crowd to stand just behind Daniel's shoulder. He leaned close to Daniel's ear and murmured, "She's already setting the trap." Daniel said nothing. He watched. Vanessa was starting to concentrate now. The amusement had left her face and something more serious had replaced it. She was looking at the board with real attention, repositioning her strategy, taking more time between moves. She glanced up once at Lily's face looking for hesitation, for confusion, for anything that would remind her that she was playing a toddler. Lily's face gave her nothing. Just that steady, patient, dark-eyed attention. By move 9, 2 of the guests near the doorway had pulled out their phones. Not to record for mockery. To record because something genuine and extraordinary was happening in this kitchen and they could feel it. By move 13, a woman near the window had pressed her hand over her mouth. By move 16, Vanessa's breathing had changed. Anyone standing close enough could see it. Small rapid breaths. Her left hand had found the edge of the kitchen table and was gripping it lightly. And then Lily reached forward with one small hand and moved her queen. She sat back. The room was so quiet that the sound of the jazz still drifting faintly from the garden speakers felt almost inappropriate. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. Then he opened them and looked at Daniel. "It's over," he said quietly. "She's in checkmate in 2 moves no matter what Vanessa does." Vanessa stared at the board. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. 15. She reached out and tried a move. Her last option. Lily looked at the board for 2 seconds. She moved once more. And then there was simply nowhere left to go. The silence in that kitchen lasted a full 4 seconds after the final move. And then, from somewhere near the back of the crowd, a man started clapping. Slowly at first, then faster. Then more people joined, and then more, until the kitchen was filled with the sound of 30 adults applauding a 3-year-old girl who had not moved from her spot, who had not smiled or celebrated or looked around for approval. Lily simply reached out and began resetting the pieces. Rosa stood at the kitchen counter with tears running silently down her face. Daniel turned to look at Vanessa. Vanessa was not looking at the board anymore. She was looking at her own hands in her lap. It was Daniel's friend James, a loud and enthusiastic man who had drunk 2 glasses of wine more than he should have, who called out from near the doorway. "Daniel, my man, I'll bet you $1 million that little girl doesn't lose to anyone in this room tonight." Laughter moved through the crowd, easy and warm. But Daniel didn't laugh. He looked at Lily, who was still calmly arranging pieces. He looked at Rosa, who was wiping her face with the back of her hand. And something cracked open inside him. Something that had been sealed for a long time. "That's not a bet I'm willing to take," he said quietly. "Because I already know how it ends." He walked to the kitchen counter. He stood beside Rosa. And he said to her quietly so that only she could hear, "I owe you an apology. Not for today. For every single day I let things happen in this house that should never have happened." Rosa looked at him. Her eyes were still wet. "Mr. Daniel, my fiancé mocked your daughter," he said. His voice was steady. "In my house. In front of my guests. And I heard it from the patio and I didn't say a word. I should have said something immediately and I didn't. That's on me." Would you have respected Daniel in that moment? Or do you think it was too little? The most important chess moves in life are never made on a board. They are made in the quiet moments when you choose who you really want to be. 3 weeks after that October afternoon, Daniel Hargrove had a long and honest conversation with Vanessa Cole. It was not a dramatic conversation. It was not a screaming argument or a thrown accusation. It was the kind of quiet, serious, adult conversation that is actually much harder than any argument because it requires you to say true things out loud to someone you care about and then sit with the weight of those true things. Daniel told Vanessa what he had been carrying since that afternoon in the kitchen. He told her that what she had said about Lily had not been a mistake or a slip, had been a reflection, a small, clear window into something that had been bothering him for longer than he had been willing to admit. He told her that the way she had laughed at a 3-year-old child for simply existing in a room where Vanessa had decided she did not belong had shown him something about the woman he was planning to spend his life with. And that he could not unsee it. Vanessa cried. Genuinely this time. Not the performed kind of emotion she sometimes used in social settings. Real tears. And Daniel believed they were real. He believed she was not a terrible person. He believed she had grown up inside a world that had trained her to see people in hierarchies without ever questioning whether that training was something worth keeping. He believed she was capable of being better. But he also knew, sitting across from her in the living room of that 14-room house, that he was not the person who could make her better. That was work only she could do. Work that would take time and honesty and a willingness to look at herself in ways that were genuinely uncomfortable. He ended the engagement, not in anger, not with cruelty, but clearly and with finality. Vanessa left. The house was quiet that night in a way Daniel hadn't experienced in a long time. He sat in the kitchen, which still somehow felt different to him since that afternoon, and he thought about a lot of things. He thought about how many times in his life he had walked past something important because he was too comfortable to stop and really look at it. He thought about Lily. The following Monday, when Rosa arrived for work, Daniel asked her to sit down at the kitchen table. Rosa looked nervous. He realized immediately that she thought she was about to be let go, and he felt a sharp pang of guilt at having let her carry that fear even for a single second. "I'm not asking you to sit down to fire you," he said quickly. "I'm asking you to sit down because I have something I want to say to you and I want to say it properly." Rosa sat. She folded her hands in her lap. Daniel had spent the weekend making phone calls. He had called a friend who ran a foundation for gifted children's education. He had called a child development specialist at the University of Texas. He had called Marcus, who had already independently reached out to a chess program director at a national level. What Daniel had discovered over that weekend was that what Lily possessed was not simply cute or charming or an interesting party story. What Lily possessed was something genuinely rare. Something that, with the right support, the right opportunities, the right protection, could become something that neither he nor Rosa nor anyone in that kitchen could fully imagine yet. He laid everything out for Rosa carefully. The foundation, the specialist, the educational program for profoundly gifted children, the chess program that wanted to assess Lily formally. He told her he would cover every single cost, not as charity, not as pity, but as an investment in something real that he had been given the extraordinary privilege of witnessing up close. Rosa listened to all of it without speaking. When he finished, she sat very still for a long moment. Then she said, "Why are you doing this?" Daniel thought about it honestly before he answered. "Because someone should have done it sooner," he said. "And because I have the ability to do it now. And because your daughter sat in my kitchen and reminded me that extraordinary things don't announce themselves. They just wait quietly for someone to pay attention." Rosa covered her face with both hands and cried. Lily, who had been sitting in her corner with the chess set as usual, looked up at her mother. Then she got up, walked over, and climbed into Rosa's lap and pressed her small face against her mother's chest. And Rosa held her daughter in that kitchen while the morning sun came through the windows and made everything gold. 2 years later, Lily Mendez, at the age of 5, became the youngest rated chess player in Texas history. At 6, she was nationally ranked. And Rosa, who had cleaned that house with quiet dignity for 3 years, was no longer an employee. She was a partner in the children's foundation Daniel had helped create, running programs for gifted children from low-income families across the state. The wooden chess set from the thrift store, the $2 one with the scratched pieces and the worn board, sat in a glass case in the foundation's main office. Rosa had insisted on that, because some things deserve to be remembered exactly as they were at the beginning. Here is what this story taught me, and I hope it teaches you something too. Greatness does not ask for permission to exist. It does not arrive wearing expensive clothes or carrying the right last name. Sometimes it arrives in a kitchen, on a folded blanket, with a cup of apple juice and an old wooden chess set and eyes that see the entire board before anyone else has even made their first move. And the cruelest thing we can ever do to another human being is decide who they are before we have ever truly looked at them. Look at people. Really look at them. Because you never know who is sitting quietly in the corner, waiting for someone to finally pay attention. If this story moved something inside you, please give it a like right now. Every week we bring you stories exactly like this one. Stories that make you feel, make you think, and remind you what really is the moment in this story that hit you the hardest. Okay. You never know whose day you might change. Thank you for watching.